The 6th generation has finally arrived. Pokemon X and Y hit the 3DS on October 12th. We've been playing for a few weeks now, and after all that time adventuring, battling, and bringing innocent creatures to our will,
it's pretty good. But to find out what makes this new iteration so special, we have to go back.
In the beginning, there were 151. And these pocket monsters would become cast in the ironclad childhood memory of a generation.
They were everywhere!
There were games,
Coloring programs,
guidebooks,
aisles upon aisles of merchandise.
They were Burger King toys that enthralled and suffocated throngs of children everywhere. While the fad may have died a long time ago, it never stopped being successful.
It's the second best-selling video game franchise of all time.
In fact, only Mario comes out ahead of Pokemon, and he got a 15-year head start.
Game Freak found a formula that worked. You encounter a gender-blind professor and set out on an ill-defined Pokemon journey, the purpose of which is ostensibly to catch them all.
Along the way, you meet a slew of one-dimensional characters living and interacting in a world where Pokemon is seemingly the only thing that matters.
You talk to your mom.
It's about Pokemon.
You'll look at some books.
They're all Pokemon!
You go to the bathroom, and a frickin' Seadrop pops out of the toilet and water guns you clean.
Everything is Pokemon! But you know what? That's okay. Having a realistic world full of engaging characters has never been the focus, and X and Y don't change much about that.
Pokemon is an incredibly deep game, but you never needed to reach for that depth.
Pokemon is accessible without being necessarily simple.
You can play it, have fun, beat the game, and even catch them all without knowing a thing about complicated mathematical concepts like base stats and individual values.
Most Japanese RPGs tend to obfuscate their gameplay with stuff like dramatic plot lines, angsty characters, and lots of padding. But Pokemon accentuates its mechanics, like forming battle strategies, that feeling of growing stronger, and long-term mechanical decision-making.
While Pokemon was always good about focusing on the mechanics, X and Y trimmed the fat like no other. So many long-standing complaints about the series have finally been patched up.
Previous titles struggled with an extremely boring and repetitive early game, as the first few hours would see you facing a cavalcade of endless Rattatas, Sentrets, Pidgeys, and you'd lack any flashy or fun attacks. You'd basically just be tackling them over and over again.
Or Leer if you're stupid. X and Y move at a blistering pace. Those original 151 have grown over the generations to a stable of over 700 monsters. And the new titles put them to immediate use.
By the time I reached the first gen, I'd encountered something like 15 different Pokemon, and it had taken less than an hour.
Actually, if there's one place the game missteps, it may be too easy. Generation 5 did a great job ramping up the difficulty, especially when it came to gym battles. For the first time, it could actually be fulfilling to overcome gym leaders. There was a little more to it than, here comes the ice gem, and better get a fighting move.
But early in X and Y, you get an item called the Experience Chair. And here's what it does.
Let's say your totally awesome Charizard comes out first turn and one-hit KOs a Flabébé.
Now Charizard still gets 100% experience there, but with the Experience Chair, your useless failure of a Magikarp magically gets 50%, even though it didn't do anything. That sounds good, but it breaks the game.
With a full team, you end up essentially getting 350% experience. It can be turned off, and we really think it should be.
While it doesn't ruin the game, my Pokemon were always like 10 levels higher than everything they were up against. And while breezing through the game might appeal to some players, I think it's a much more fulfilling challenge without it.
Journey of just yes, man. But while that may kind of break the game, another change could finally break open the competitive metagame for a whole new generation of players.
Because for the first time, Pokemon's complex mechanics have been distilled into an accessible and, dare I say it, understandable format.
Once upon a time, you'd have to peruse guides on the internet to find out about things like effort values, a hidden stat that only the most competitive players would go out of their way to train.
But now, effort values are right there on the bottom screen in plain sight. There's even a minigame you can use to train them. And while that experience care might make the game easier, in the long run, it turns out to be an invaluable tool for EV training.
The blistering pace never lets up. Throughout the whole game, nary a minute goes by when it's not delighting you with new items and showing off all kinds of Pokemon from old favorites to brand new ones. There's a badass Tyrannosaurus.
There's a set of jingling keys that turn out to be way more useful than you could have imagined.
There's a possessed demon sword.
A possessed demon sword!
And you can feed it cupcakes.
Overall, it seems X and Y were built to accentuate everything the series has ever done well, while cutting everything that didn't work in the past.
If Pokemon has never appealed to you before, the new game will do nothing to change that.
But for the rest of us, X and Y is the best Pokemon has ever been.
And there's online stuff.
So you can play it in the bathtub.